You know what completely broke my brain one afternoon and made me rethink every single gardening habit I had built over 2 decades? A quiet old man at a local farmer's market. He had the most insane tomatoes I had ever seen in my life. Deep red, heavy, perfect, and he was selling them out of the back of a pickup truck that looked like it had survived 3 different presidential administrations. So I walked over and I asked him what he was doing differently, and he just smiled and said, I stopped fighting my soil about 30 years ago, and it has been thanking me ever since. I had no idea what that meant at the time, but I could not stop thinking about it. So I started asking around. I visited his land. I watched how he worked. And what I learned over the next couple of years completely flipped everything I thought I knew about preparing garden soil. Today, I am going to walk you through exactly what this man and other farmers like him do instead of tilling and why it works better than anything I ever tried before. And stick around because toward the end, I am going to show you a method for turning a patch of dead lawn or weedy ground into a rich, productive garden bed without ever touching a tiller once. I need to be honest with you first. For over 20 years, I tilled my garden every single spring without question. My grandfather did it. My father did it. I did it. You fire up that machine. You churn the soil until it looks fluffy and clean and ready, and you feel like you actually did something. And it worked, kind of. My plants grew, my garden produced, but there was always this frustrating cycle of weeds coming back faster than I could pull them, soil drying out too quickly, and every spring starting from scratch like the previous season never happened. When I started paying closer attention to how certain old-school farmers in my region were managing their land, I realized something uncomfortable. I had been solving one small problem every spring while quietly creating 3 bigger ones underneath it. What I am about to share with you is not about throwing away everything you already know. It is about understanding something that took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out on my own. Here is the core idea behind why so many experienced traditional farmers completely avoid tilling their soil. It all comes down to one simple belief that runs through everything they do. The soil is alive. Not just a little bit alive, but massively, incredibly, deeply alive. There are fungi threads running through it like an underground internet. There are bacteria breaking down organic matter and turning it into food for your plants. There are earthworms building air channels and depositing the richest natural fertilizer your plants will ever absorb. This whole underground system works together in a way that took nature thousands of years to build. And when you fire up a rototiller and churn everything apart every spring, you are not preparing your soil for a good season. You are tearing down the very system that was going to do all the hard work for you. Here is the part that really stopped me cold. Every single time you till, you are pulling thousands of weed seeds up from deep in the soil where they were sleeping in the dark and dragging them right to the surface where sunlight and air wake them up and set them off. That beautiful, clean-tilled bed you are so proud of on Monday morning is basically a weed explosion waiting to happen by the weekend. The science has confirmed all of this. And farmers who never went near a tiller figured it out generations before the scientists did just by watching their land closely year after year. So let me walk you through exactly what they do instead. The first method is deep mulching. And I want to be clear about what I mean because this is not what most people picture when they hear the word mulching. This is not a thin little sprinkle of straw around the base of your tomato plants. This is a serious, intentional, thick blanket of organic material that completely covers your garden bed and does the job a tiller pretends to do only better and without a single drop of fuel. Here is how to do it. Once your soil has warmed up in early spring and it no longer feels cold and wet to the touch, you lay down a layer of organic mulch 4 to 6 inches deep across your entire garden bed. Straw works great, shredded leaves work great, aged wood chips work great. A mix of all of them works even better. The key is that it has to be thick enough to block sunlight from reaching the soil surface. That is what kills the weeds before they even start. But here is the beautiful part. That thick layer does 3 powerful things at the same time. First, it smothers any weed seeds sitting on the surface by cutting off their light and air. Second, it locks moisture into the soil below, so you end up watering significantly less through the heat of summer. Third, and this is the one that changes everything, it slowly breaks down from the bottom up, feeding the billions of soil organisms underneath that are quietly building you the richest, most crumbly, most productive soil you have ever grown anything in. You are not forcing the soil open with a machine. You are feeding the system that opens itself. The earthworms pull that decomposing organic material down into the soil, naturally creating aeration tunnels as they go. The fungi bind soil particles together into what soil scientists call aggregates, which is the reason healthy soil can hold both air and water at the same time, instead of either turning to dust or drowning your roots. In your first season of doing this, you might still see some weeds push through, especially if your ground has been tilled repeatedly for years and has a deep bank of weed seeds waiting in the soil. That is completely normal. Just pull whatever comes through and add another inch of mulch on top. By your second season, the difference will be so obvious, you will actually laugh at how much time you spent weeding before. I went from spending hours on my knees pulling weeds every single week to about 20 minutes. That is not an exaggeration. Now here is the question that trips almost every gardener up when they first hear about no-till methods. If you are not tilling the soil, how do you stop it from compacting into a hard brick that nothing can grow through? This is where a tool called the broad fork changes everything, and it is one of the most underused and underappreciated things you can own as a gardener. A broad fork is beautifully simple. It is a two-handled tool with long steel tines, usually about 12 to 14 inches long, attached to a bar that is roughly 18 to 20 inches wide. You step onto the crossbar to push the tines down into the soil, then you rock the handles back toward you and lift slightly. That is the entire operation. No engine, no fuel, no noise. Just you and basic leverage doing something genuinely remarkable to your soil. What makes it completely different from tilling is this. When you use a broad fork, you are lifting and loosening the soil without flipping it upside down. The layers stay exactly where they belong. The top layer, which is where almost all of the biological activity happens, stays on top. The deeper layers with their own communities of organisms stay in their place. You are cracking open compaction and creating air channels without destroying the structure that nature spent the entire previous season building underneath your feet. The best times to broad fork are early spring before planting and again in fall after you have cleared your beds. Work your way down the length of the bed, stepping and rocking the handles every 6 to 8 inches. For a standard 4 by 8 foot raised bed, the whole thing takes you maybe 10 minutes. The difference you will notice almost right away is that water stops pooling on the surface and actually soaks straight down into the ground. Roots push deeper, and within a few weeks, earthworms move into those loosened channels and keep them open for you so you do not have to. The first time I broad forked a bed that had not been tilled in 2 years, I genuinely could not believe what I was looking at. The soil was darker and richer than anything I had ever produced with a rototiller. It was packed with earthworm castings. When I grabbed a handful and squeezed it, it held together and then crumbled apart gently when I pressed my thumb in. That is exactly what healthy living soil feels like. And I got there by doing less, not more. The third piece is something so simple, it almost feels like a trick. Instead of digging compost and amendments into your soil, you spread them on top and leave them there. Once or twice a year, in early spring and again in mid-fall, you spread 1 to 2 inches of finished compost right across the surface of your garden beds, on top of the soil or right on top of your existing mulch layer. You do not dig it in, you do not turn it under, you just leave it there and walk away. I know that feels completely wrong. Everything most of us were taught says that amendments have to be mixed down into the root zone to do any good. But here is what actually happens when you stop doing that. Rain and regular watering carry dissolved nutrients slowly down through the soil profile to exactly the depth where your plant roots are growing. Earthworms drag organic particles down through their tunnels and deposit castings at multiple depths throughout the soil. And the fungi that thread through your soil grow upward into that compost layer and transport nutrients directly to your plant roots through those underground networks. This is precisely how a forest works. Nobody is out there rototilling the woods every spring. Nobody is digging amendments into the forest floor. Yet forest soil is some of the most biologically rich, most productive soil on the entire planet. Leaves fall, decompose on the surface, organisms break them down and carry them into the earth, and the cycle keeps improving the soil every single year without anyone disrupting it. That is the process you are copying in your garden. I have been top dressing my beds this way for 4 years now. The soil is spongier. It absorbs water faster. My plants look healthier from the moment they go into the ground because their roots are growing into a living, biologically active environment instead of sterile, pulverized dirt that has to start rebuilding itself from scratch every season. Now let me walk you through the fourth piece, and this is where everything truly comes together because this is the step that turns a good soil management approach into a completely self-sustaining system. Most backyard gardeners skip this entirely, and it is honestly the most powerful move in the whole method. Cover cropping. Instead of leaving your garden bed sitting bare and exposed after you finish harvesting in late summer or fall, you plant a living crop that protects and actively feeds your soil all the way through the cold months. Bare soil is exposed soil. And exposed soil loses moisture, gets hammered by heavy rain, loses nutrients to leaching, and basically rolls out a welcome mat for every weed that wants to move in before spring. Cover crops prevent all of that at once, while also building fertility into the ground for free. The crop you choose depends on what your soil actually needs. If your soil is running low on nitrogen, plant crimson clover or hairy vetch. These are legumes, and their roots host bacteria that pull nitrogen directly out of the air and convert it into plant-usable fertilizer in the ground. That is free fertilizer building itself underground all winter long. If your soil has hard compacted layers below the surface, plant daikon radish, sometimes called tillage radish. These send a thick taproot driving down 12 to 18 inches, punching right through hardpan layers that even your broad fork might not fully break up. When the radish dies back over winter, it leaves behind an open channel filled with decomposing organic matter that becomes a deep highway for water movement and future plant roots. If you simply want maximum soil protection and a heavy load of organic matter added to your beds, winter rye is the best thing you can plant. It grows fast, builds a dense root network throughout the soil, and produces so much top growth that when you cut it down in spring, you instantly have a ready-made thick mulch layer sitting right there waiting for you. The timing works like this. Seed your cover crop about 6 to 8 weeks before your average first frost date. That gives the plants enough time to get properly established before cold weather slows everything down. In spring, about 3 to 4 weeks before you plan to put your main garden crops in the ground, you cut the cover crop off right at the base. Do not pull it up. Do not till it under. Just cut it and lay the top growth flat on the soil surface as your first mulch layer of the new season. The roots decompose in place underground, leaving organic matter and open channels throughout the soil. This is called chop and drop, and it feeds directly back into everything else we talked about. You can see how this all locks together. The deep mulch suppresses weeds and feeds the surface biology. The broad fork opens up compaction without touching the soil structure. The compost top dressing adds nutrients that biology and water carry down naturally. And the cover crops protect the whole system through winter while building fertility and structure from the root zone upward at the same time. Each one makes the others work better. That is what a genuinely sustainable system looks like. Now let me walk through some of the most common patterns I see in conventional gardening and how this approach handles each of them differently. I did all of these things myself for years, so this is not me judging anybody. It is just some honest observations that I wish someone had shared with me a long time ago. The first pattern is tilling to deal with weeds. Most of us learned that tilling chops up weeds and gives you a fresh, clean start, and it does for about 2 weeks. But what you are actually doing every time is churning thousands of dormant weed seeds up from 4 to 6 inches below the surface right into the germination zone where they immediately spring to life. You are not eliminating the weed problem. You are reloading it. Deep mulching smothers the surface seeds by cutting off their light instead of stirring the whole seed bank up. The second pattern is tilling to loosen compacted soil. It works in the moment, but tilled soil recompacts faster than soil that was never disturbed because you have destroyed the biological glue holding the structure together. The fungal networks and earthworm channels that naturally held the soil open are gone, and without them, every heavy rain just collapses the structure right back down. With the broad fork method, you loosen without destroying, and the biological framework rebuilds stronger and stronger with each passing season. The third pattern is tilling amendments in, spreading compost, and then mixing it down into the soil feels thorough and responsible, but you are diluting those nutrients throughout a depth your shallow feeder roots may never even reach, and you are shredding the very fungi that would have delivered those nutrients directly to your plants far more efficiently than any tiller ever could. The fourth pattern is leaving beds bare over winter. Once the harvest is done, most of us are just ready to be finished and walk away. Completely understandable. But bare soil over winter loses topsoil to erosion, loses nitrogen to rain leaching, and gives early germinating weeds a huge head start in spring. A cover crop holds everything in place, adds organic matter, and improves your soil while you are inside, staying warm, doing absolutely nothing. It is genuinely the closest thing to getting something for nothing that I have found in 30 years of working with soil. I want to be honest with you about one thing before we wrap up. If you have been tilling your garden for years and you switch to this approach tomorrow, you are probably not going to see jaw-dropping results in the first 30 days. Your soil has been through repeated disruption, and the biological systems that need to take over the work require time and stability to rebuild themselves. Give it one full growing season. By your second year, most people who make this switch report noticeably fewer weeds, much better water retention during dry spells, and soil that is significantly easier to work by hand than anything a tiller ever produced. By year 3, most of them tell me they cannot even imagine going back. But that first season asks for patience. And honestly, that might be the most important lesson buried inside this whole method. You have to trust a process you cannot always see happening. The real work is going on underground, quietly, constantly, building something that will keep getting better every year as long as you stop tearing it apart. Now let me show you something that most gardening books and videos skip right past. This is perfect if you want to convert a brand new patch of ground into a productive garden bed without any tilling at all. A section of lawn, a weedy, neglected corner of your yard, anything. The method is called sheet mulching, and some people call it the lasagna method, and it is one of the most effective things I have ever done in my garden. Here is exactly how it works. Start by mowing or cutting whatever is currently growing in the area as short as you possibly can. Do not remove anything, just knock it all flat. Then lay a single layer of plain corrugated cardboard completely over the entire area, overlapping every edge by at least 4 to 6 inches, so that no light can sneak through any gap anywhere. Soak the cardboard thoroughly with your hose, then start layering material on top. Put down 2 to 3 inches of finished compost, first followed by 4 to 6 inches of straw, shredded leaves, or aged wood chips. Water the whole layered pile again until it is damp all the way through, then walk away. I know that is the hardest part, but it is the most important part. Over the next 3 to 4 months, the cardboard cuts off all light to the grass and weeds underneath and smothers them completely without any chemicals. Earthworms move up into the area and begin breaking down both the cardboard and the organic layers above it, carrying fertility deeper into the native soil below. The compost and mulch on top decompose together, creating a rich planting medium, while the soil underneath is being naturally improved by biological activity from below. If you set this up in fall, then by the following spring, you can plant directly into it. Just push the mulch aside, cut a small hole through whatever remains of the softened cardboard, and set your transplant right into the ground. The roots grow straight down through the worm-worked soil underneath without any resistance. I set up 2 beds this way about 3 years ago, and they are now producing better than any bed in my entire garden. A tiller never touched them, not even once. This is what working with your soil instead of against it actually looks like in practice. You are not using any special technology. You are not spending a lot of money. You are simply choosing to let biology do what biology has always done better than any machine ever could. And the results compound every single year instead of resetting every spring. If any part of this shifted how you are thinking about your soil preparation this season, I really want to hear about it down in the comments. And if you have already been experimenting with no-till methods, tell me what you are seeing in your own garden. There is a lot more of this kind of deep dive coming, so hit subscribe if you do not want to miss it. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.